Okay, Algebra 1, I am on page 690. We're going to look at example 1 together. Now, example 1 has two parts. It's got A and B, which I have on the left and right here. This is part A, this is part B. And I want to actually start with part B first. Okay, so we're going to do this one, and then we'll move over there. All right, so let's look at the instructions. It says, state the excluded values for each rational expression. Okay, so rational just means that these are all real numbers. Okay, expression means there's no equal sign. And it says state the excluded values. Okay, so you guys know by now that this is a fraction, and there are values that we can find for n that work here, and there are values that we can find for r that will work over here. But the excluded values mean because this is a fraction, okay, there are certain things that fractions can't be. For example, let's look right here. I'm just going to make up a couple of fractions. 1/3, that's a real fraction. What about 0/3? That's also a real fraction, okay? But what about this one? What if I had 3/0, okay? Can we take a number and divide it by 0? Like, could I take 3 pencils and split it up, divide it, between 0 people? The answer is no. This doesn't work. We can't have a 0 on the denominator. Okay, so that's what it's talking about, where it says state the excluded values. The excluded values mean what happens when the denominator is equal to 0. So to solve it, we're going to set it equal to 0. That looks like a 6. Set it equal to 0. Now the cool news for this is we don't care what's on the numerator. The numerator, the top number, it does not matter, right? Because it can be a 1, it can be a 0, it could be a -1, right? All numbers on the numerator matter, will work. The bottom is what matters to us, so we need to set it equal to 0, because if it equals 0, it won't work, okay? So this is a trinomial. How do we solve a trinomial that's equal to 0? Well, we know how to do that. It's called factoring. So let's go ahead and factor this problem. What's plus minus mean? Plus minus. N squared is just n and n. All right, so what are the factors of -5 that add to 4? How about a +5 and a -1, right? 5 times -1 is -5. 5 minus 1 is 4. All right, so this is the factored version of this trinomial. Now the next part, what do we do when we have two sets of parentheses or two binomials that equal 0? Well, some of you probably remember it's just the opposite of what's in here, okay? But what we'll do in this case, okay, what we will do in this case is we're going to take each one and we're going to set it equal to 0, right? Some of you can do this in your head, and if we solve it individually, n equals -5, and n equals, add 1 here, n equals 1, right? And those would be our answers, right? Now remember, it's asking us for the excluded values, so I'm going to show you what I mean by that. We're not going to do this for everyone, but I'm going to show you, okay? What if I plug these numbers in up here, 1 and -5? Well, let's watch. To the denominator. What's 1 squared? Well, 1 squared is 1. What's 1 times 4? It'd be plus 4 times 1, which is plus 4. And over here, we have a -5, right? So when we plug the 1 in, see how I'm plugging it in for the n? I'm just putting it down here, right? So this is the 1. 1 squared is 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 minus 5 is 0. All right, so if we plug in 1 to this denominator, it gives us 0, which we already said we can't have a 0 on the bottom of the denominator. Okay, let's do the same with -5. Just to be sure here. All right, so now we have -5 squared plus 4 times -5, right? We're plugging -5 in now. Then we have a -5 back there. -5 squared is 25, minus 20. 4 times -5 is -20, minus 5. 25 minus 20 minus 5 is 0. So if we plug in -5 as well, it also gives us 0, which we said we can't have. Okay, so you're not going to write your answers as n equals -5 and n equals 1. We're going to say n can't. This is the can't. All right, doesn't equal. N can't equal -5. N can't equal 1. Again, it's just like an equal sign with a slash through it. Okay? All right, so remember, we factored this bottom. Okay? We factored the bottom here. And we set it equal to 0 to solve. We're going to do the same thing to this one over here. Okay, remember, this is part A on example 1. We're going to set the denominator equal to 0, r squared minus 36. Now, some of you are probably like, hey, that was a trinomial. We know how to factor trinomials. How do we factor binomials? Well, there's two methods to factor binomials. The first one is to look for a greatest common factor. But I don't see one. There's nothing common between the r squared and the 36. These two aren't the same. The second way is to look and see if it's a difference of squares problem. Now, some of you may or may not remember how to do difference of squares, but I'm going to walk you through it anyways. First off, is this a perfect square, r squared? Yes, it is. Is 36 a perfect square? Yes, it is. Okay, so both of these are perfect, and there's a minus sign in here, which means that's a difference. So we have the difference of squares problem. So the way we do that is we go right to our two sets of parentheses, set it equal to 0. Remember that difference of squares is always plus minus. And then the first term, which is going to go here and here, we square root the first term up here. So the square root of r squared is r. The square root of r squared is r. The second term we will square root 36, which is 6 and 6. So now I have r plus 6, r minus 6 equals 0. From here, I will set each problem equal to 0, and I will solve. Minus 6. Now remember, we're looking for the values that are excluded. Remember, these are the numbers that make this denominator equal 0. And if it equals 0, it's a fraction that has a 0 on the denominator. So we're going to put our little slash through our equal sign. Okay? Remember, we're looking for excluded values. All right? We do that by factoring the denominator and setting it equal to 0. Guys, I want you to try a couple of problems for me. Okay, a couple of problems. So let's go over to page 693. All right? And on 693, I want you to try numbers 1 and 2. Okay, you have any questions? Go ahead and drop it in the comments here. Other than that, good luck.